Zhilei Zhang versus Joseph Parker. I am really looking forward to this fight. I think it might be the best heavyweight fight we get to see in all of 2024. Now, unfortunately, that mega fight between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua is probably evaporated because Joseph Parker pulled off the so-called upset and beat Wilder in 2 days before last Christmas. And of course, the main event for this card is Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. Now, I have to tell you, I'm really not that interested in watching a world-class boxer take on a MMA fighter in his second ever pro boxing fight. I probably will watch Joshua Ngannou simply out of curiosity, but I'm not looking at it from the point of view of expecting to see a high-level boxing match. However, I am expecting that from Zhang versus Parker. So let's break down each fighter's strengths and then take a look at how those strengths could match up in the ring. All right, so with Zhang, some of his strong points are, well, he keeps a very disciplined high guard with both hands up. Probably something he developed during his long and medaled as a elite amateur fighter. He medaled at the Olympic and World Championship level. He's a very disciplined fighter, I think, mentally in the ring, in terms of he doesn't get overly excited, and he doesn't once he starts to land good shots, he doesn't get overly excited and then suddenly try to take his opponent out. He just kind of bides his time and then lines up his shots, and he's able to get somebody out of there with like a one-punch KO. But it's not like a wild, wingy punch. It's very calculated. So, for example, if you look at his last fight versus Joe Joyce in the rematch with Joe Joyce, he set it up. He set up his sort of right hook, right uppercut hybrid punch. He set that up by throwing the jab, and then I think he anticipated that Joe Joyce was going to try to counter with a counter right hand, and simultaneously as Joe Joyce was throwing his counter right hand from the southpaw stance, of course, Zhang threw a short left hook and dropped Joe Joyce straight down, and Zhang just knew right away. He just turned and walked away with his hands raised, knowing that Joe Joyce wasn't going to be able to beat the count, as he wasn't. So to be able to land that type of short KO punch takes a lot of mental discipline. It takes a lot of experience to know when exactly to throw and how to set up those types of KO punches. One of Zhang's best weapons is his straight left, and that may be an obvious punch for a southpaw to have, the straight left, because they're standing with their right foot forward, their right hand forward, that the right hand is their jab hand. A straight left is their power punch. So in martial arts terms, that straight left would be their reverse punch because it's thrown from their rear hand. And the thing is with Zhang's straight left is I think it's powerful because it's short, it's quick, it's very smooth, and he does not telegraph it. So for a southpaw, you're able to throw that straight left as a lead punch. Now, the opposite is true for the orthodox fighter. They can throw a straight right lead on a southpaw. So normally you would not lead necessarily with your power punch. The dictum is, you got to throw your jabs first all the time and then throw a right hand, or throw the right hand jab all the time, then throw the left hand. You always want to set up that power punch. But when you have opposite stance fighters, that you get to break that rule occasionally. You can't do it all the time, but it is possible to throw that left hand lead for Zhang, and he does it quite well, and he does it really effectively, and he lands it with precision, almost surprising precision. He makes it look easy. And again, it's because he doesn't wind up, he doesn't load up on that punch. He just lets it flow straight from his shoulder, and it's short and it's quick and it's powerful. So I think he will be able to land that straight left on Joseph Parker. Now, how Joseph deals with that is another story, but I think it's one of Zhang's bread and butter punches, so I'm sure we'll see it. And I'm sure we'll see him have some success with it. Now, one sort of surprising thing I think that Zhang does that we may not expect so much from a heavyweight is he's actually a decent inside fighter. And that he showed those skills in his fight versus Hrgović. Even though he wound up losing that decision, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see him throw these nice, super tight uppercuts right on the inside and super tight hooks to Hrgovic's head when they got within range. It's a whole different skill set to be able to throw those short inside punches, and Zhang was effective with that. So now, whether he gets the opportunity to do that with Joseph Parker is, I won't say it's up to Joseph Parker, but it depends on what type of distance that gets negotiated between the two men. But it's important to know that we know that Zhang can fight like that when called upon. Another thing that Zhang does that I think is a plus for him is he uses mostly that sort of walking stance where he's not doing the traditional step drag or drag step or shuffle step. And he's not really bouncing around a lot on the balls of his feet. He kind of saves his energy by adopting that walking stance. Now, when I refer to the walking stance, I'm not talking about what Teofimo did, which was just walk around the ring with his hands down at his side, which was just really horrendous to watch. But Zhang does it more like how Mike Tyson would do that at times, or they just take a kind of relaxed walking stance to not so much follow, but kind of negotiate and follow the close the distance with their opponent before they get into range, or to barely get out of range. And by doing that, heavyweights can get away with that more than the smaller fighter, because the smaller fighter, if you're gonna do that, you put yourself at risk of maybe the other fighter will suddenly pick up the pace with their footwork and close distance more rapidly on you than you were expecting. But it's just something that heavyweights can definitely kind of get away with more, and that's what Zhang tends to do for much of his footwork, is just to have that relaxed pace. Now, what that also does, and it's kind of disguised, but because he's so relaxed, that also adds to the power of his punches. Because again, he's not telegraphing, he's not winding up, and he's not swinging like that. He's just so relaxed that he can just torque right into the punch from either side, from either his right hand or his left hand, and put his full body weight behind it. So these are all Zhang's strong points. Now, the one question that's come up with him in the past has been his conditioning, because it looks like he's running out of energy. I understand that at least in one fight that was a draw against a fellow, last name Forrest, that there was a medical concern prior to the fight. So, I mean, this is always possible, right? I mean, fighters have to, even though heavyweights don't have to make weight, they're not dealing with that, but they do have to fly long distances, acclimate to a different time zone, maybe different foods. It could be a number of things going on. Certainly under a little more stress leading up to the fight, so, you know, it's easier for your immune system to drop and you pick up a bug or something. So, I mean, I'm not sure if it was like, you know, an illness or it was just actually insufficient conditioning on Zhang's part. But my expectation is for March 8th that he knows full well of the kind of fighter he's facing in Joseph Parker, and that he and his corner will do everything to prepare properly in terms of conditioning. Now, one more strong point that I think is in Zhang's favor is that, as far as I know, he's always worked with the same trainer for his pro career, and that is Sean George, who's a former fighter himself out of the New York area. I think he won the Golden Gloves as an amateur, and then went on to, I know for sure he went on to fight as a cruiserweight professionally. And Sean George is a type of fighter who was he was in Gleason's gym. That's where I met him. He was in Gleason's gym in that sort of late 90s, early 2000s era, where a lot of fighters who fought in the Golden Gloves in New York then went on to have like very storied professional careers, such as Zab Judah, Paul Malignaggi, Yuri Foreman, Dmitry Salita, and the list goes on. But Sean George was of that era when I think winning the Golden Gloves still meant quite a lot, and even to fight locally on the New York scene at that point still meant something. So Sean George was a type of fighter who isn't like loud or flashy or anything like that. He's just very serious, very polite, very nice fellow, and just came into the gym and worked hard. And so I say all that to say I think he brings that same mentality and that same approach to how he trains his fighters. And as far as I know, he's been involved with members of the Chinese national amateur team turning pro. He's been involved with them for, I think, over a decade, because Sean George has been involved with the Duva family in terms of boxing, and I believe it was Lou Duva who originally kind of like wanted to reach out to the Chinese boxing amateurs and kind of bring them into the fold as professionals. So my point there being is that the trainer Sean George and the fighter Zhang Zhilei, they know each other incredibly well at this point, and so I expect the communication in the corner to be clear and smooth between the two of them. At this point, they might have their own sort of like lingo in the corner, I'm guessing. And so that should be a strong point, because they've sort of grown together throughout Zhang's pro career. Okay, so let's take a look at what Joseph Parker brings into the ring with him. Well, one thing I have to say about his guard is that I'm very happy to see, like in his last fight with Deontay Wilder, that he kept a disciplined high guard, as you should well do when you're faced with someone who's known to be a power puncher with a right hand. That was, or could have been, more of a concern, because I noticed earlier on in his career, Joseph tended to keep his lead hand low and kind of lean in, which is not the best guard to have all the time. Now, I noticed that he will still do that occasionally, but at this point in his career, and kudos to his team, and to Joseph himself for making a pretty big adjustment in terms of his guards. So he is able to do this traditional high double guard, right? And then sometimes he'll switch where he will drop the lead hand, but now he'll cover his face with his backside of his right fist. He'll use that type of guard, and almost sort of a cross guard, but not quite. So he's added to his guards. He's developed better guard defense, but most importantly, especially for this fight, the high double guard. Now that's going to be important because we've got an orthodox versus southpaw fighter, and so in this case, Joseph can't really afford to leave his left hand, his lead hand. He can't really afford to leave that low because now he's completely open on this side for the southpaw jab. So I think that Parker's camp, or his team, will simply build on the fact that he already established the high guard for Deontay. Now let's just keep working on that to deal with the southpaw. One of Joseph Parker's his bread and butter punch is the overhand right. Now, we did see him really start to lay into that with Deontay once he knew he was landing on Deontay, and once he knew he had Deontay in a bit of trouble, Joseph just started unleashing with the overhand right, and then he'd come back with the left hook, either to the body or the head, and that's kind of the classic thing to do if you're the shorter fighter. In the matchup with Zhang, Joseph is maybe a couple inches shorter, but just from the way he developed that overhand right, it looks to me like he's kind of used to being the slightly shorter man in the ring. So that overhand right is it's a good punch for somebody who's typically giving away a height. So one of the other things that I noticed Joseph was doing well against Deontay is that he was level changing well. Like he was coming into the body with his jab, and I think that is going to be important for him with Zhang. In fact, I hope that he throws a little more to the body than even more than he did with Deontay. I think with Deontay, his strategy was something that was kind of exposed by Tyson Fury, which is just move this guy straight back. He can't fight backing up. So right out of the gate, Parker just kind of stepped to him and tried forcing him back with either jabs to the head or jabs to the body. And I wouldn't say charging in, but almost just charging straight in. That's definitely not something he should do with Zhang, and I'm sure he and his camp already knew that before they even signed for the fight. So I'm sure they've got a different strategy for Zhang than they did for Wilder. So the one main concern for Parker is simply the guard, number one, and then opening up a little bit too wide on punches once he does close the distance. Now, if you enjoyed an action fight, you should obviously. Joseph Parker's a great heavyweight to watch. If you haven't seen Joseph's fights versus Dillian White, you should check that one out because it was quite the barn burner. And even though Parker wound up losing the decision, he didn't lose any stock or any merit in that fight because it was such an action-packed heavyweight fight. Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm going to make them sound like they weren't technical. It was technical, but they both wound up looking a little bit loose or a little bit wild because they were both coming so hard at each other. They're really, both of them were really kind of loading up on their punches a bit. And so anytime one of them would miss, they'd miss and be out of position a little bit. But in terms of a great heavyweight fight, yes, you got to check that one out. White versus Parker. Now, the thing is, White was more than happy to afford Parker, you know, return fire and, yeah, you want to throw down, let's throw down type of spirited action. But that's not really the type of fight you want to adopt versus someone like Zhang, who will be much more patient and defend your onslaught, but then look for small openings and is capable of picking you off with a small, tight inside punch, whether it's an uppercut or a hook. So let's take a further look at how Zhang versus Parker kind of match up. Again, sort of a classic southpaw in Zhang, taller southpaw in Zhang versus the shorter orthodox fighter in Joseph Parker. So I sometimes with southpaw orthodox matchups, there's a question of will they start tripping over each other's feet, because the orthodox fighter has their left foot forward and the southpaw fighter has their right foot forward. Now, traditional wisdom, if you're an amateur at least, is that both fighters are supposed to try to keep their lead foot on the outside of their opponent's foot so that they can turn that way to the outside. That's fine, except that that's what you learn when you're an amateur. And so by the time you're a professional, and certainly an elite level professional, as both of these men are, you got to have more than that. Like, you got to be comfortable not just going. So if I'm the orthodox fighter, I can't just be comfortable trying to go out towards my left and pivot. I also have to be comfortable coming to the right on a southpaw, and I have to understand what the risks are for both and what my advantages are for both. Okay, so just because of the way their footwork is, I don't expect there to be a lot of tangle ups with the feet, mainly because Zhang does that sort of walking footwork as opposed to shuffling or bouncing around a lot. Joseph Parker is slightly more bouncy, but I don't see their feet getting tangled. The issue that I do see possibility of is more the head clash, mainly because I do expect Parker to try to level change and drop down and come to the body, and then it's on his way up if he starts to throw a punch and come up when he's on the inside, and just depending on which way Zhang is leaning, and if Zhang is throwing a punch simultaneously, it's very easy for them to smash heads, and so a cut could open up on either one of them, and so hopefully both fighters have invested in a good cut man for this fight. It seems like being a good cutman, I'm not sure if that's now become a lost art. I've had the great honor and good fortune to have two of the best in the business ever work my corners. I had the late great Al Gavin work my corner for me once, and I had the late great Joe Souza work my corner for me a couple of times. And a good cut man is more than just someone that you hope is there if you should get a cut. A good cut man also knows how to revive a fighter in between rounds. They know how to help prep you in the change room before you step out there, and they're really like having a second wonderful assist for the lead trainer who's working the corner. A good cut man knows how to be positive and not step on the trainer's toes, but still lift your spirits in the corner. I guess that's the best way of putting it. I mean, along with doing all the other things they're supposed to do, which is close a cut should one open, and bring down swelling, another important task for a good cut man. So I hope both corners have the best of cut men with them when they step into the ring on March 8th. Now, as I mentioned before, because we're a southpaw orthodox matchup, both men have to keep this hand up, their lead hand up, and both men have to stay active with the jab. For the simple reason that if you don't keep your jab active, then your opponent's gonna land on you, because it's the jab versus jab on the same side. So it's not that you always want to land your jab necessarily for a righty fighting a lefty or a lefty fighting a righty, but it's almost like you have to do that to keep that other person's hand occupied, if that makes any sense. So while you're playing that game, you're also seeing how they react, and then you're looking for how to set up all of your other punches, whether it's the straight hand right hand for Joseph Parker, or the overhand right for Joseph Parker, or it's the straight left for Zhilei Zhang. I would assume that because Joseph Parker is pretty good at changing levels and going to the body, that he will invest even more heavily on Zhang's body. Particularly because Zhang's conditioning has come into question before, but also because, look, Zhang is a skillful, technical boxer, and if you can try to take something out of him early on, invest in the body in the early rounds, then hopefully that might slow him down as the fight goes. But since Joseph seems comfortable doing that anyways, I would just say, hey, add on to that. Let's not just jab to the body with the lead jab to the body, or head fake to the head, go to the body, fake to the body, go to the head. Let's add more very hard body shots behind that jab, or even straight right to the body, or kind of a hybrid hook uppercut across almost towards the liver. That's where your liver shot is versus the southpaw, because they've got their right elbow to just drop down and cover their liver, so it's kind of harder to get that sometimes on a southpaw, but you can come from the other side with your right hand. So hopefully Parker does invest in the body early on. For Zhilei Zhang, I think he just has to start to become aware of Joseph Parker's overhand right, because I do expect Joseph to use that. That's his bread and butter. So Zhilei Zhang has to be aware of that, and keep his guard up, and then just stay steady with his jab, and kind of just do what he's been doing all along, and just be patient and look to set up either his straight left, and then from his straight left set up his other shots, like his uppercuts and right hooks. So overall, I think if Parker comes in great condition and stays mentally disciplined for the duration of the fight, I think he has a good chance. Now, logic would dictate that the man who has the height and the reach and the good straight left should win the fight, but that's what makes this an intriguing matchup. I think both men are coming into this fight off a high point, right? Because Zhang just really decisively beat Joe Joyce for the second time in their rematch. He got that one punch KO, and Parker is coming off like just an absolute career high, right? He just dethroned Deontay Wilder. Even though he didn't get a KO, he beat him soundly from pillar to post, and kind of pulled the upset in a sense that everyone was hoping that Wilder would win so we could then get Wilder versus Joshua. But hopefully, Parker didn't sort of let that get to his head too much. He doesn't seem like that type that would. And hopefully he was just able to kind of regroup quickly and say, okay, we've got this new foe. Let's focus on what I need to adjust to deal with this southpaw, this tall southpaw with a great straight left. Both very likable men. Both Zhang and Parker are very likable men. And I have to say, I think, not knowing either one of them, so I can't really speak on their behalf, but it seems like they both are fighting for something bigger than themselves. And as a foil to that, let me point to fighters who put crowns on their own head. They anoint themselves the king. Well, who are they fighting for? They're fighting for themselves because they just figure they have the right to crown themselves. I don't know. I mean, historically, if we look at the global history, when the world was ruled by monarchies, there's a reason coronations took place in places of worship like cathedrals, because, I mean, if you're going to become the king or the queen, let's hope you have a higher calling because you have so much power. Let's hope that you have a grounding in something bigger than yourself, and you're trying to do something for people, not just exploit your power that you've been granted politically, by force, by birthright, what have you. So, yeah, I just get the feeling that both Joseph Parker and Zhilei Zhang kind of feel like they represent their nations, they represent their ethnicity, and they bring something bigger than themselves into the ring when they fight, and not in an ego sense, but just in a sort of cause sense. And what am I fighting for? Like, why am I putting myself through this? Looks to me for both men, I think they fight for much more than their own personal ego. So it's hard for me to pick a winner. I'm not really rooting for one versus the other in this particular case. I just hope we get a great fight. I'm looking forward to this fight March 8th. What are your thoughts on Zhang versus Parker? Do you even care about Joshua versus Ngannou? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thank you for listening.